I always thought the suburbs were safe, that white picket fences and manicured lawns promise peace, a community, a second chance. But that illusion shattered on a Wednesday morning when my world went still and silent. The sun had just begun peeking through the tall pines behind our fence, scattering golden light across the dewy grass. I had just stepped out with a mug of coffee when I noticed something off. The backyard gate was swinging open, slowly creaking as if someone had passed through it recently. That was strange. I always locked it, especially since Lily's accident. My daughter's safety had become the axis around which our world spun. Lily? I called, expecting to see her reading in her wheelchair near the garden bed, where she loved to watch the butterflies. No answer. A chill cut through the warm morning air. Lily? I called louder now, pacing down the steps, spilling coffee over my wrist, but not caring. I scanned the garden. Empty. Her book was there on the bench. Her water bottle. But not her. And, God, her wheelchair was gone too. Panic surged through me, tightening in my throat. I dropped the mug, not even flinching as it shattered against the concrete. Lily? The sound of barking came from the other side of the yard. Our dog, Baxter, losing his mind near the old HOA community storage shed by the side path. I ran, feet pounding the lawn, heart jackhammering in my chest. Then I heard it. Faint, hollow, a knock, followed by another. And then, barely audible, my daughter's voice. Daddy, I'm here. I can't open. I yanked the lock on the shed door. Nothing. I screamed her name. No response this time, just whimpering. I backed up and kicked the door hard. The latch cracked, but held. Again. Harder. The lock snapped open and the door burst inward. There she was, crouched inside the dark, cluttered space, her legs tucked to her chest, cheeks streaked with tears and dirt. No wheelchair, no cushion, just cold concrete and abandoned lawn tools around her. She looked up at me with terrified eyes. Karen took my chair, she whispered. Everything inside me twisted into rage. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It wasn't an accident. Someone had deliberately removed my disabled daughter from her wheelchair and locked her in a shed. And that someone was our HOA president, Karen, who just last week called Lily's wheelchair an eyesore that ruins the community's curb appeal. This neighborhood wasn't safe, and I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. It started with hope. We moved to Oak Ridge Estates just 6 months after the accident that left Lily paralyzed from the waist down. Before the crash, she had been a bundle of energy climbing trees, chasing our dog Baxter, racing me to the mailbox every evening. But the drunk driver who ran a red light took all that away. And though she survived, thank God, her spirit dimmed. Her laughter grew rare, her eyes distant. So we moved. We sold our old home in the city and relocated to the quiet, tree-lined neighborhood where everything looked perfect. Oak Ridge Estates promised tranquility, community, and the kind of slower-paced life we thought would help Lily heal. It had a community park, friendly sidewalks, and smiling neighbors who waved as we drove by. It felt like the reset we all needed. That's when we met Karen. She was the president of the Homeowners Association, introduced herself with a clipboard in one hand and a fake smile on her lips. "We just like to keep things orderly here," she said during our first conversation. "You'll love it. Just make sure your mailbox stays freshly painted, and don't leave trash cans out past pickup day. We run a tight ship." I nodded, thinking she was just another overly enthusiastic volunteer. We didn't think much of it then. We were focused on Lily, unpacking her books, setting up the new wheelchair ramp, finding new doctors, and adjusting to a life where everything now had to be calculated, accessible, and emotionally safe. At first, it all went smoothly. Lily loved the park. The neighbors seemed pleasant. We added a flower box to her bedroom window and painted the front porch together. It wasn't a perfect life, but it was quieter, gentler. We even saw glimmers of Lily's old spirit, especially when Baxter made her laugh with his silly games. But then came the first letter, typed on HOA letterhead, signed Karen S. President. It read, Dear homeowners, we've received a few concerns about the recent installation of a visible mobility ramp. While we sympathize with your situation, please ensure that future modifications follow HOA visual guidelines to preserve neighborhood appeal. Sympathize? I called her. She answered with an overly calm tone. Oh, I'm sure it's all a misunderstanding, she said. But the ramp could be painted to better match your siding. It stands out too much. It was a ramp. For our daughter, who couldn't walk. We let it go. Painted it a shade closer to the house. Even added flower pots at the bottom to soften the industrial feel, as Karen had suggested. I didn't want drama. I just wanted peace. But it didn't stop there. Next came the notes, folded and left anonymously in our mailbox or slipped under our door. One said, "This is a family-friendly community, not a hospital wing." Another, "Eyesores affect property values. Be considerate." They didn't mention Lily by name, but we knew who they meant. And one day, when Lily found one of the notes before we did, she didn't speak for the rest of the evening. Then the incident with the sprinkler system happened. A neighbor's kid confessed to Lily that Miss Karen said your ramp messed up the neighborhood's symmetry. Days later, our ramp was sprayed with muddy water from redirected sprinklers that only seemed to aim at our porch. That was the first time my wife cried over it. Still, we told ourselves to hold on. Maybe Karen was just stuck in her ways. Maybe she didn't understand. Maybe she'd change. But deep down, I was already beginning to see it, the mask slipping. Karen wasn't just strict, she was controlling. And worse, she saw my daughter's condition as a blemish on her picture-perfect neighborhood. Lily wasn't just a child to her. She was a problem to be managed, hidden. The next day, Lily's custom wheelchair cushion was found tossed in the community trash bin. That was when I installed the cameras. Something was coming. I could feel it. And it did. Because Karen's obsession with curb appeal wasn't just about lawns and fences. It was about erasing anything or anyone that didn't fit her pristine little world. It didn't take long for the discomfort to evolve into something uglier, something colder, and more deliberate. At first, we tried to write off the notes and comments as isolated moments of ignorance. But the signs were stacking up fast, and they were impossible to ignore. I had never imagined that living in a suburban community would feel more like living under surveillance. It was as if every movement we made, every ramp adjustment, every time Lily wheeled out onto the driveway, was being judged from behind freshly washed windows. Karen's voice was always the same, sugary sweet on the surface, laced with something poisonous beneath. "Oh, I noticed your daughter out in the front garden again," she said one morning as I was trimming our hedges. "She's a strong girl, but maybe the backyard would give her more privacy." Privacy. That was her coded word. What she really meant was, keep her out of sight. Another day, I overheard her telling a delivery man that our house had unfortunate modifications and that the neighborhood standards were slipping because some people bring their problems with them. She didn't realize I was standing just around the corner. The worst part? Lily heard her, too. She had just come back from physical therapy that day, cheeks flushed from the effort, a hint of her old smile back on her face. But after hearing that comment, she stayed in her room the rest of the afternoon, quietly removing the stickers she had once joyfully plastered all over her wheelchair. That night, she asked me, "Daddy, am I making this place ugly?" I've never felt such an ache in my chest. I knelt beside her, looked her in the eyes, and swore, "You are the most beautiful thing in this entire neighborhood. Anyone who can't see that is blind and cruel." But even that didn't undo the hurt. Then came the HOA warnings. They arrived weekly, sometimes bi-weekly. Your front yard bird feeder violates HOA lawn ornament guidelines. Trash bin placed too close to the driveway entrance. Unauthorized flag, a disability awareness flag, displayed in a visible area. Ramp bolts may be unsafe, must be reviewed by HOA safety committee. One evening, we found Lily's ramp partially unscrewed. Bolts loosened as if someone had tried to sabotage it. The security camera I had installed hadn't caught the act. Someone had come from the side, careful and deliberate. I suspected Karen, but without proof, what could we do? I reported it to the police. They filed a report but said, without a witness or clear footage, their hands are tied. That was the first time my wife suggested we move again. But we had already poured our savings into this house. And Lily was just beginning to form a routine, a fragile sense of stability. We couldn't take that from her, not again. I decided to confront Karen, politely but firmly. I knocked on her door one afternoon with Lily beside me, hoping that maybe if she saw Lily's face, really saw her, something might soften in her. Karen answered with a forced smile. Yes, I wanted to speak to you in person, I said. The ramp was tampered with. Someone could have seriously hurt Lily. I don't want to make accusations, but we're worried. She looked down at Lily and tilted her head. Maybe if she spent more time inside, Karen said coolly, these things wouldn't happen. I couldn't believe what I'd heard. My fists clenched involuntarily, but I stayed composed. Are you suggesting my daughter is to blame for being targeted? I asked, my voice barely masking the fury boiling beneath. She shrugged. I'm just saying the neighborhood has expectations. We try to maintain a certain atmosphere. I stepped closer. And does your atmosphere include cruelty to children in wheelchairs? Karen's smile didn't break. I think this conversation is over. And just like that, she shut the door in our faces. I stood frozen on her porch for a moment, Lily's small hand gripping mine. She was quiet, but I could feel her trembling. When we turned back toward our house, Karen's curtains shifted slightly. She was watching. That was the turning point. From that day forward, Karen stopped hiding behind passive-aggressive notes and started enforcing her control openly. She began showing up at our property line with her HOA clipboard during Lily's afternoon playtime. She'd record videos, pretend to take pictures of violations, and make Lily so uncomfortable she'd retreat inside after only 10 minutes outside. Our mailbox was vandalized twice. A neighbor's kid said Karen had warned his parents to stay away from the wheelchair people. My wife reached a breaking point and suggested installing more cameras, fencing the entire backyard, anything to make Lily feel safe again. But how do you feel safe when the enemy has power? When she signs the rules? When she enforces the so-called community standards? We started documenting everything: dates, times, screenshots, recordings. I created a private log on my laptop, because by then, I knew this wasn't just neighborly friction anymore. This was targeted harassment, and I feared something worse was coming. It was supposed to be just another quiet Sunday. My wife and I had promised ourselves a quick breakfast date, something we hadn't done in months, just 30 minutes at the corner cafe, barely a mile from home. Lily insisted we go. I'll be fine here, she said with a grin, already setting up her art station in the backyard. Baxter, our loyal Labrador, lay by her feet. We kissed her on the forehead, promised we'd bring her favorite muffins, and left. That decision still haunts me. When we returned, the gate was open. That familiar creaking sound felt like a scream now. At first, I thought Lily might have gone inside, maybe to grab water, but Baxter was pacing and barking frantically, not his usual protective bark, but panicked, desperate. Something was wrong. Her sketchbook lay open on the patio table. The pencil she was holding was snapped in half. Her blanket was on the grass. But no Lily, and no wheelchair. My wife began yelling her name, voice cracking as she ran around the property. I dashed to the sidewalk, shouting, scanning the street. Nothing. That's when I heard it. A dull knock. Then another. Faint. From behind the shed near the HOA maintenance lot, tucked behind the fence. Baxter was already clawing at the locked door by the time I reached it. I pressed my ear to the wood. Daddy, I'm here. I can't move, it's dark. I didn't wait. I rammed my shoulder into the door once, twice, until the latch broke free. The smell of oil, grass clippings, and mildew hit me first. Then I saw her, Lily, curled into herself on the cold cement floor, shivering, her legs twisted uncomfortably beneath her. No cushion, no support, a dirty tarp half covering her. And her eyes, those wide, terrified eyes. I dropped to my knees, gathered her into my arms. She clung to me and whispered. She took my chair. She said it was ugly. She said I should stay hidden. She, Karen, rage boiled through every cell in my body. I carried Lily inside, called 911, then called our lawyer. Karen didn't deny it. When the police arrived, she was already prepared with a clipboard, printed letters, and a smug little smile. She was left unattended, Karen said smoothly, as if she were commenting on weeds in someone's yard. The HOA bylaws state that equipment and unsightly items must be stored out of view when not in use. The child was unsupervised in front of a shared community asset. The ramp wasn't even in compliance. The officer looked stunned. You removed a disabled child's mobility device and locked her in a shed? I secured her temporarily, Karen snapped. For her own safety. For her own safety? I roared. You kidnapped my daughter and left her helpless on a concrete floor. She was disruptive. Her chair was blocking the garden pathway. It's a safety hazard. And frankly, Karen looked directly at me, it diminishes the value of our homes. That was the moment I saw it. No remorse. No shame. Just pure, calculated arrogance. The police said they'd investigate. They took our statements, photos of the shed, and notes from Lily's medical records. But Karen was cunning. Her husband was a former city official, and she knew how to manipulate a report, how to spin a story. She even had the gall to send a letter the next day. In light of recent misunderstandings, the HOA will be conducting a full review of yard storage and visible disability devices. Please be advised that temporary community detainment may be necessary to ensure neighborhood integrity. My wife broke down sobbing. Lily wouldn't sleep unless one of us was beside her. And Baxter didn't stop growling at the back fence for days. I posted on the local community group, shared our story. But Karen had friends, loyal ones, people who'd lived there for 20 years and saw her as a savior of the neighborhood. They began spinning it, accusing us of negligence, calling it another overreaction from new residents who don't understand the rules. But something had changed. Some neighbors, quiet, hesitant, began reaching out. A retired teacher named Mrs. Caldwell left a note on our porch. I'm ashamed. I've lived here 14 years. I've watched Karen terrorize anyone who doesn't fit her mold. I'm ready to speak up if you fight back. A family down the block with an autistic son offered to share surveillance footage. They had caught Karen wheeling Lily's chair into the shed. Their doorbell camera saw everything. That night, I started building a case. I compiled timestamps, notes, video clips. I created a digital folder labeled Karen Evidence of Harassment. Because if no one else would stop her, I would, and I wasn't going to wait for justice to knock on our door. I was going to bring it through the front gate. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, no, that had passed. Fear had burned out like a fire left too long without air. What remained in its place was something colder, sharper. Purpose. I sat in my home office with every light off, my screen glowing blue, in the dark, eyes locked onto hours of security footage. My fingers shook as I paused, rewound, rewatched the same 5-second clip again and again. Karen dragging Lily's wheelchair across the lawn like it was trash, and then, minutes later, opening the shed door and returning without it. I timestamped the footage, archived it, copied it to 3 separate drives. Then I started writing. A formal complaint, a legal draft, a public letter. My fingers moved faster than my thoughts. For every HOA bylaw she had quoted at us, I found a federal disability protection she had violated. For every smug letter she had sent, I collected screenshots of her online statements, her audio from neighborhood meetings, evidence of her prejudice. And then I contacted the media. I knew the risks. I knew exposing this could make us targets, bring in trolls, threats, or even make life harder for Lily. But I also knew this. If I let it slide, Karen would win. And Lily would carry that fear forever. My wife supported me fully this time. She's bullied enough people. It ends with us, she said, gripping my hand as we sat at the kitchen table, legal forms spread around us like battle plans. I reached out to a disability rights organization. They responded within hours. We've dealt with HOA abuse before, their representative told me. But this is criminal. We'll back you all the way. The next morning, I held a neighborhood meeting in our driveway. I printed out the photo of Lily, shaking, locked in that shed. I set it up on an easel. I invited every household. Some came, many didn't, but I spoke anyway. My daughter was locked in a shed without her wheelchair by the president of our HOA. I said calmly, "This is no longer a disagreement. This is abuse." Murmurs spread. A few neighbors left embarrassed, but others stayed, others watched, and others recorded. Mrs. Caldwell, the retired teacher who'd left us the note, stepped forward. "I've been silent too long," she said. "Karen threatened to fine me when I built a handrail for my late husband, said it made the house look elderly. That woman doesn't care about this community, only how it looks." A few heads nodded. A man I barely knew, Greg from down the cul-de-sac, spoke up. "She slashed my son's art mural fund because he painted a wheelchair symbol on the sidewalk. Said it was graffiti." One by one, people began talking, and then came the turning point. Mr. Langford, a quiet man who rarely came out, rolled forward in his mobility scooter. "You're not alone," he said, voice trembling. "Karen fined me last year for using my front ramp. She called it clutter. She has a pattern. It's time we expose it." That night, I uploaded the footage to every local news tip line I could find. I posted a video online, a 90-second summary of everything that had happened, ending with Lily's drawing, a picture of a home with a giant red X over the shed. The title? "HOA locked my disabled daughter in a shed because her wheelchair was ugly." It went viral overnight, and suddenly we weren't just a family battling a neighborhood tyrant. We were the center of a national story. Reporters camped outside. Disability activists tagged city officials. Celebrities tweeted support. Karen's name trended for all the wrong reasons. She tried to defend herself, held a press conference on her porch, called us dramatic, and accused us of slandering a respected community leader. But the damage was done. The video footage had spoken louder than her words ever could. And then the police came knocking again, this time with a warrant. Karen was arrested for unlawful confinement and reckless endangerment. When they led her away in handcuffs, her eyes found mine across the lawn. She didn't scream. She didn't apologize. She just stared, jaw tight, as if the world had failed her, as if she were the victim. But I didn't care anymore, because when I looked down and saw Lily gripping my hand, smiling for the first time in weeks, I knew we had already won. This wasn't about one woman's cruelty anymore. It was about standing up for every child who'd been made to feel like a burden, every parent who'd been told to stay silent, every neighbor too afraid to speak. And we weren't staying silent ever again. The weeks that followed felt like watching our neighborhood split down the middle with a jagged crack. Karen's arrest sent shockwaves through Oak Ridge Estates. Some residents were stunned, some outraged, others embarrassed. But many were just silent. That silence told me everything. The HOA board held an emergency meeting the very next day. They issued a brief, carefully worded statement. The Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association does not condone the actions that allegedly took place. We will fully cooperate with authorities and take internal measures to ensure community standards are upheld. Not a single word about Lily, about the truth. But the truth had already taken root, online, on television, and in people's hearts. Our front yard turned into a symbol overnight. People left notes on our fence, flowers on our ramp. Strangers, parents of disabled children, veterans in wheelchairs, survivors, drove by just to say, "We stand with you." A father from a neighboring county said he was forming a petition to legally protect families with disability needs from HOA overreach. We signed it immediately. However, not everyone was on our side. Some neighbors scoffed as they passed. "This isn't how we do things here," muttered one man at the mailbox. Another neighbor removed the Accessibility Matters sign we had placed near our front lawn. Someone even keyed our van one night, scratching the word "liars" into the passenger door. One of Karen's longtime friends, Martha, confronted us at the community mailbox. She gave her whole life to this neighborhood, she said, voice shaking. You had no right to ruin her reputation like that. You people brought attention to yourselves. You people. That phrase lingered, and not just because of what it implied, but because of what it denied. We weren't seeking attention. We were demanding dignity. Still, we kept our heads high. Lily had started smiling again. She wasn't afraid of the backyard anymore. She even began wheeling herself to the park down the road, her sketchbook balanced on her lap. The whispers didn't faze her anymore. She was stronger now, braver, and perhaps a little wiser too. Inside the HOA, the power structure began to crumble. 3 board members resigned. A special election was held. For the first time, people who had long been ignored, retirees with ramps, families with special needs children, ran for leadership roles. And they won. The new president, Mrs. Caldwell, the retired teacher who had spoken up at our driveway gathering. She knocked on our door one evening with tears in her eyes. I should have done something sooner, she said. We all should have. We forgave her, because that's what communities are supposed to do: learn, grow, and become better than they were. The old shed, the one where Lily had been locked away, it was demolished during a volunteer event organized by the new HOA board. In its place, we built something beautiful, a community garden with raised beds designed for wheelchair access. At its center stood a wooden sign hand-painted by Lily herself that read, "Visibility is not a crime. Compassion is not a choice, it's a duty." That day, dozens of families came out, some bringing tools, others food, many bringing nothing but open hearts. And for the first time in months, Oak Ridge Estates felt like home again. But the healing wasn't complete. We still got occasional emails from people defending Karen. The trial was ongoing, and her lawyer had mounted a vigorous defense, arguing she was overwhelmed, misunderstood, and had no criminal intent. But the footage, the statements, the pattern of behavior, it was too much to ignore. We attended every hearing, not out of revenge, but for closure. For Lily, because she deserved to see what justice looked like. She deserved to know her voice mattered, even when others tried to silence it. The courtroom was cold, sterile walls, stiff benches, lawyers murmuring, cameras flashing quietly from the back rows. Lily sat beside me, clutching my wife's hand as the judge read the final verdict. Her feet didn't touch the floor. Her legs, motionless but strong in their own way, dangled slightly over the edge of the bench. Her chin was up, her gaze steady. Guilty, the judge said. Karen was found guilty on 3 counts: unlawful confinement, reckless endangerment of a minor, and willful violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The judge's voice was calm but firm. This court finds the defendant's actions to be cruel, discriminatory, and in direct violation of both state and federal protections. Karen stood frozen, lips drawn in a straight line. Not once did she apologize. Not once did she look at Lily. She was sentenced to 6 months of community service and a fine, along with mandatory sensitivity training and a public apology to the family, in writing and in front of the HOA. The court didn't opt for jail time, citing first offense and age, but it was a public disgrace. Her reputation was finished, her power stripped, her control gone. But the biggest sentence? She was permanently barred from holding any position of authority in any HOA across the state. That, in many ways, was justice enough, because power was her drug, and now was out of reach. After the trial, life didn't return to normal, it evolved. We were no longer just the family with the ramp. We were part of a movement. Lily's story became the catalyst for new state legislation. A bill, dubbed Lily's Law, was introduced to protect families from discriminatory HOA practices against persons with disabilities. It passed unanimously in our state Senate. And in the months that followed, other states began exploring similar protections. Our home, once a target of whispers and passive-aggressive fines, became a place of pride. The front porch had fresh coats of paint, but this time, we chose bold colors because we weren't hiding anymore. We hung Lily's artwork in the front window, framed with sunflowers and soft blue hues. Her ramp was widened, upgraded, and now feature handrails with carved quotes from her favorite books. She went back to school, confident, brave, and with her head held high. Her teacher told us she'd begun sharing her story with classmates, not as a victim, but as someone who stood up for herself. No one's allowed to decide where I belong, she said during her first class presentation. And the community garden? It flourished. Neighbors planted vegetables, children painted stones to line the path, and every Sunday, families gathered to sit around the raised beds and talk, not about violations or bylaws, but about life, about healing, about how much better it feels when we see each other as people, not problems. One afternoon, Lily rolled up to the shed's former site, now full of lavender and rosemary, and handed me a small journal. "I'm going to write everything down," she said, "so other kids like me never have to feel like they don't belong." I opened the first page. She had already titled it, "The Girl in the Shed, A Story of Being Seen." I swallowed hard. That night, I watched her fall asleep peacefully for the first time in a long time. Her chair was by the bed, sunlight streaming through the window where we had hung her latest watercolor, an image of a ramp leading up to a home surrounded by blooming trees. And beneath it, in her careful, deliberate handwriting, she had written, "They tried to lock me away, but I belong in the light." That's when I knew. We didn't just survive Oak Ridge Estates. We reclaimed it. We rewrote the story. We turned cruelty into courage. And for every parent who watches their child struggle to be accepted, for every kid who hears they're too different, for every family who is told to stay quiet, we are proof that speaking up doesn't make you a problem. It makes you a pioneer. This wasn't just a story about my daughter. It was a story about every family that's ever been silenced, every person who's been made to feel like they don't belong simply because they live life differently. It's about how unchecked power, when fueled by cruelty, can turn a peaceful neighborhood into a place of fear, and how one voice can be the beginning of real change. If what happened to Lily can happen in a safe, respectable HOA neighborhood, it can happen anywhere. That's why I'm speaking up. And that's why we created this channel, HOA Denied Access, to share real stories from families like ours, to expose the truth about HOA abuse, to hold those in power accountable, and most importantly, to remind every single person who's ever felt in the way that you matter. Your voice matters. Your rights matter. So here's what you can do right now. Small Blue Diamond subscribe to our channel, HOA Denied Access, and become part of a growing community that refuses to stay silent. Small Blue Diamond share the story with friends, family, and on social media. Awareness is the first step to action. Small Blue Diamond comment below if you've faced harassment or discrimination from your HOA. Your story deserves to be heard. Small Blue Diamond support legislation like Lily's Law in your state. Contact your representatives. Push for protections. And if you're someone in power, whether you run an HOA, a school board, a company, look closer. Listen better. Be the leader your community truly needs. We didn't choose to become a symbol. We just chose to fight back. And now, we invite you to stand with us. Because no child should be locked away. No voice should be silenced. And no one should ever be denied access just for being who they are. Welcome to HOA Denied Access. We're just getting started.